These are all the secrets of the Italian opening. Along with the main theory, we will also see 3 lines where white can win in less than 10 moves. This doesn't only apply to beginners and intermediate players, I will also show you how even GM Hikaru got crushed by Magnus in the same exact opening. Let's go. The Italian game starts with the move e45, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop c4. This is the starting position. Now black has 2 main moves, bishop c5 and knight f6, and then there is a third one which is made just to absolutely stop the fried lever. What is the fried lever? It's probably the trickiest chess opening that I think everyone should try when you start playing chess, and is knight g5. The idea is very clear, you are targeting the f7 point, which is the weakest point in black field. In general, in every e45 structure, f7 and f2 are very weak from the very beginning until the very end. So here you're threatening to take with the knight and forking the queen and the rook. And there is just one defense, which is the move d5. The problem for black is that black needs to know a few more moves. After pawn takes, the most natural move, so capturing back this pawn, is a mistake, because this pawn is now protected once, attacked twice, so knight takes seems very normal. Also, the queen is looking at the knight. But you see the evaluation bar? Boom! There is this amazing move. The knight is attacking the queen and the rook. Basically, the king has to take. We sacrificed a knight, but we are going to go with the queen, giving a check, attacking the knight and the king. And we might win that knight very soon. If the king tries to hide on g8, this is absolutely terrible because we give a very nice checkmate with the bishop. If the king goes on e8, what are you going to play? You just take this knight back and you're threatening checkmate. You're also threatening to take this knight, which after pawn takes, queen takes, would be again a fork to the king and the rook. The most challenging square is definitely for the king to go on e6, protecting the knight, which you are going to attack one more time. Now there are 3 attackers and 2 defenders, and there is just one way to keep protecting it, and is with this knight, either on e7, passive, or on b4, a little bit more aggressive. The knight is also attacking the pawn on c2. That's why here you just castle and you don't really mind if they are going to take, because of course you take here with check, and then you can always move the rook if you want to save the rook, but you might even have checkmate. So c6 is the move that black has to play to defend this knight with a pawn, and now knight f2, knight takes c2 seems like a problem, but again it's not a problem. We just play d4 and we let black take this pawn. And we might even let black take the rook. We are going to take this pawn on e5, and the idea is that even if we are lots of material down, this king is way too weak. It's fun that here there is not a direct checkmate, a forced checkmate, but what we need to do is to just bring another piece to the game. The rook is now the 4th piece hitting this knight. At the next move, we are going to take on d5, and probably checkmate the king. For example, if bishop c5, we can just take knight takes. I would say rook takes here. I love this move. We're attacking the queen, we're attacking the bishop, and threatening millions of discovery checks. If the queen is just moving away, I think we have made in a few moves. Rook d6. If the king is taking, is checkmate on f4. And if the king is going backwards, oh, it's just checkmate on f7. That's why in this position black has to know the move knight a5, attacking the bishop, which needs to be moved, so probably this check is the smartest idea, so you force black to defend. And if you want to play the fried lever, you need to study 2 possibilities for black. 1, the move c6, 2, the move bishop d7. Both are possible, and if black is very prepared, black can get equality, but it's a huge fight. If black really wants to avoid a fried lever, I noticed that many players play the move h6 here. This is a huge waste of time. They're pushing a pawn without a real purpose and not developing one of their pieces. What you need to do is to strike at the center. The move d4 is definitely the strongest move in this position. After pawn takes, you can decide either to just castle, and then after knight f6 to play for the move e5, or you can simply take back and develop your pieces in a very normal way. knight c3, castle. And if you can always push the pawn on e5. For example, knight f6, knight c3, bishop c5. These are all very normal move. Now there are two pieces attacking your knight, right? There is just the queen protecting. So you just trade the knight, the pawn is taking back, and now boom, e5. I love this move if you can play it. The knight doesn't have many squares, cannot go here, cannot go here, cannot go here, cannot go on d5 because it's just attacked 3 times, protected just 1. So either the knight goes back home or goes on h7. Both squares are kind of sad, but I think h7 is a little bit better because at least black can castle. Knight d4 looks amazing. It's true that we are moving the same piece twice, but you're improving the knight, attacking the bishop, forcing the bishop to move again, and bishop b6 might be a very normal move. And now you can go probably with queen g4, attacking this pawn. And they cannot castle here, guys, because if they castle, always remember when there is a queen on the g file, you're gonna snap the pawn on h3. And you're threatening checkmate. Plus, if they push, the rook is hanging. At the very least, in this case, you just give checkmate because the pawn is pinned on f7. So you can take, bing, boom, bum. So the anti-fried lever is not really scaring us. We go for the move d4. But what if black is playing the main moves? For example, knight f6. Do we go fried lever? What if we don't want to go fried lever? Then we play the move d3. We need to protect this pawn with a pawn. Why not with the knight? It's a very important difference. Because here black has a brilliant sacrifice. Knight take e4. And the idea is that if the knight is taking back, there is the move d5. And that's a fork, winning back the piece. And usually white gives away the bishop here, giving away the bishop pair. Now black has already the 2 bishops, and this position is actually already better for black. The best move here, just for you to know how to defend, would be bishop d3. You save the bishop, but you find a great way to be able to capture back the pawn anyway. That's how you should play, but position is still equal here. So actually, not knight c3, but protect with the d3 pawn. And this exact position is basically what we reach if black is playing immediately bishop c5, because we can just play the move d3 and then they play the move knight f6. But attention, in this position we have an extra option, and it's very exciting, and it's called Evans Gambit, and it goes with the move b4. The idea is that we want to sacrifice this pawn to 1. Get quick control over the center with the move c3 and d4. 2. We might want to start an attack against the king with the sneaky move queen b3. Bishop and queen looking at this pawn. Let's see what happens once the bishop is taking, because things can go really bad for black very quickly. So let's say c3, the bishop needs to move one more time. Usually they might go back on c5. They can also go back on a5, but let's see first this very natural move. We play the move d4. And what you need to remember is that usually you don't want to take immediately back this pawn. You want first to castle, because you have nothing to be worried. This move is not possible. Can you find a move for white here? Is bishop take f7. Because after king takes, we go with the queen, give a check, win back the bishop. We're going to take here. The king can no longer castle. The bar speaks for itself. The problem for black is that actually many natural moves are a mistake here. For example, knight f6 is not a good move, because we can take back this pawn, the bishop needs to move, and then we play the move e5. Every time you can expand at the center, kicking this knight, you can do it. Where is the knight going? Now, either the knight goes back home or goes on g4. Anyway, we are going to push at some point the pawn on h3, kicking the knight on h6, and we might give our bishop away. But wait for your opponent to castle. So we develop a knight, this is very natural, and once they castle, we play the move h3. Now, after knight h6, we could take on h6 directly, but we might just threaten that. For example, bishop g5 is an amazing move. The queen has to move, f6 cannot be played, so queen e8 is basically the only move. Then we can go with knight d5, bringing another piece to the attack. And do you see the big threat here? We didn't take on h6 because we want to do it now. Because after bishop takes, pawn takes, we have a nice fork. So yeah, we could take immediately on h6 or make it even better. If the knight is moving away, we are not winning the queen immediately, but we might win the king very soon because we can sacrifice the knight, take with the bishop. And now, believe it or not, there is basically no way to stop a queen from coming to g5 and give a checkmate in a few moves. Of course, we need to first remove the knight. Also note that a knight on h6 might be checkmate as well. So this is game over. There are a few more ideas that you need to know in the Evans Gambit. And what if the knight goes on e7 to avoid the pawn from being pushed, winning a tempo on the knight? C take d4. The bishop needs to move. And then you go with the knight on g5. You're attacking this pawn, which would be a fork. And there is one natural way to defend it, which would be castle. Now, usually, just for you to know this, there is a possible trade here. After knight takes, the rook takes, the bishop takes, the king takes. Usually, it's not good for white to give away two minor pieces, 3 plus 3, 6 points, in exchange of rook plus pawn, 5 plus 1, 6 points. Material-wise is equal, but it's not good for white in the middle game to give away two minor pieces, because the rooks are not really important in the middle games, or at least they are the last pieces to really join the action. So we prefer minor pieces in the middle of the game, we prefer the rook and the pawn in the endgame. So white doesn't want to take here, but rather go for the kill. Queen h5, threatening everything. To take on h7, to take on f7. And there is no way to stop both threats. If in this position the bishop goes on a5, we see another beautiful idea of the Evans Gambit. First of all, we play the move d4. After pawn takes, we cannot even take back. And we play the move queen b3, attacking f7, but we might also exploit at some point the misplacement of this bishop. The only sensible way to defend f7 is with the queen, because if knight h6, the bishop can just snap it, and then f7 is hanging. So queen e6. Now we would like to take on d4, but we can't, because the pawn is pinned, so we have to castle. Knight f6, this pawn cannot be taken because we would take just on f7. Now we take back here, this pawn is protected by the knight, and black should never take a pawn on e4. It's way too risky to have the queen, the rook, sorry, the queen, the king, the knight, all on the open file, I'm sorry. So d6 is usually what black plays here to stop the move e5, which is, if not is very strong. And now you have a beautiful tactic that you need to keep in mind. That's why this bishop is misplaced in many cases. And it's the move, boom, d5. Because after knight takes, you take. If they take with the pawn, you have queen b5, which is a check, you win the bishop. The only move that seems a bit more fighting is queen takes b5, because also your rook is under attack, but you just don't care, because you go with a check, whatever they do, you take this bishop, and if they take the rook, you're kind of happy, because you just need to move your knight out, and now this queen has no squares to go, is trapped, and all you need to do is to find a way to capture it, and I think the easiest way is to play the move bishop a3, so you keep all the squares blocked, and the rook is going to finish the dirty job. The Evans Gambit can be such a fun opening for white, but unfortunately we can play it just if black is playing bishop c5 here. But what if black is playing knight f6? Here, either you go fried liver or you play the move d3. And after bishop c5, we get in the Italian game, Giuoco Piano. Now again you have two options. I will show you both possibilities. And in one of them, I will show you one game where I won in 13 moves when I was 9 years old. So Giuoco Piano would be the setup with c3 and d3. Instead, Giuoco Pianissimo would be with the knight developed on c3. Let's go to check the game. So we are in the Italian game. I played d3 and she went with the move d6. Now my idea is to play bishop g5 followed by knight c3 and knight d5. And this is exactly what happened in this game. The idea is that I want to make the most out of this pin. The knight cannot move because the queen behind would be hanging. So I'm attacking the knight one more time. And there is no way to defend this knight with any of the pieces. There is no possibility to go with the bishop back on e7. If not, black should definitely do that. Now, my opponent tried to kick this bishop away. She played the move h6. But this is a mistake, a huge mistake. Can you see why? So if we simply would move the bishop back, this would be a huge success for black, because maybe they can even play the move g5, maybe. Sometimes white can just sacrifice. But at least, you know, they got a move. What I played here is instead an intermediate move, and this knight take f6. It's a check. If it wouldn't be a check, then definitely black should take this bishop. Instead here, since it's a check, the pawn has to take, and the pawn is now no longer protecting the other pawn. So after this, I could take this pawn, attacking the rook has to move. And now there is just one thing that I need to do, and it's to slide my queen on the g file to give a kiss of death. So, as a very aggressive kid I was, I played knight h4. With the only idea to bring the queen on g4. But the queen cannot go on g4, right? Because there is a bishop covering that square. So I need to get a bit slower. Either I play queen f3, queen g3, or I play knight f5 and then queen g4. My opponent was very generous and helped me with bishop e6, helping me to trade this bishop and then to slide my queen on g4, king h7, and I won in 13 moves. That's why I love the Italian game. Unfortunately, I learned over time that this plan doesn't always work. First of all, black could stop all in one the bishop from getting to g5 by playing moves like h6. But also, if black is allowing, d6, bishop g5, knight f6, if black is allowing all this, the only thing that black needs to be careful of in this position is to be ready to face knight d5 in a good way. That's why bishop e6 is the move that black has to play. Because now, if the bishops are traded, the pawn is controlling this square, also this other square. And these double pawns are actually not a big problem, because first of all, they control all central squares. Second of all, they cannot really be attacked by enemy pieces. Third, after the king is going to be castled, the rook is going to be on a very powerful open file. So there is definitely compensation for this weakness. If the knight goes on d5 anyway, it's time for the bishop to say goodbye, to be traded. And yeah, if the pawn is taking, we just go back with the knight. If the bishop is taking, we might do something else. Just castle maybe, or h6, something like this. So after a while, I got bored of the Giuoco Pianissimo, and I switched to play the Giuoco Piano, which is c3. This is a game of Magnus versus Hikaru in 2011, and it shows so many amazing plans for white to win that I wanted to show you. So the first idea in the Italian game, Giuoco Piano, is to play the move c4 to play at some point the move d4 in order to take back with a pawn and to have two strong pawns at the center of the board. Now, d4 is not played too early, because what white wants to do is to first finish off all the development. How to do it? d6, bishop back, this is a grandmaster move. Also castle is good, also knight here is good. Many moves are good in this position. a6, the idea is to give a square to this bishop, knight out. And Magnus is starting another idea of the Italian game, the knight dance. The knight is also, usually cannot go to the most natural square because it's occupied by a pawn. So the knight needs to be rerouted towards d2. And usually the knight goes on g3. This is the final goal. Because from there, can try to attack the king with knight f5. Usually knight f5. Knight h5 is very rare because, yeah. So h6, knight g3, castle, castle. Amazing. This knight maneuver is also possible if you castle before playing it. What you just need to do is rook e1 and then bring the knight on g3. Bishop e6, h3, and now we have the queen the queen and the bishop actually looking at this pawn, which is not really a threat right now, but always look for this possible sacrifice. The queen is just letting the rook say hi to each other. The rooks are connected. The development of black is completed. White is soon to be completed. Bishop out. Again, we saw that to capture the bishop is possible, but actually it's quite pleasant for white to play when there are double pawns and the f file is open. So here Hikaru went with the knight on e7, same idea as white to bring the knight on g6. And now one more idea. If we go with the knight on f5, we are just hanging a pawn because this square is covered by 3 pieces, just our pawn is looking there. So there is another beautiful idea to increase the pressure, and this knight h4. Sometimes we might even go with the queen on f3 to support our knight to get to f5. So knight g6 was played, and Magnus went with a knight on f5. Now Hikaru wanted to trade. There was a trade, and now another fun idea. Notice that Magnus didn't play the move d4 yet, but is trying to go on the king side. f4, opening up this rook, bringing another piece to the attack. And here, Hikaru tried to go for a counterattack on the queen side, which is also very typical with the move c5. Bishop c2 is another typical move. You might say, like, why? The bishop is looking at 2 pawns of the same color. It seems blocked. But once you play the move d4 and the pawns are traded, and usually you have also the possibility to push forward the e pawn, then the bishop is going to be a monster. And imagine a bishop together with a queen looking at h7. That is a nice idea. So b5, Hikaru going for the counterattack, queen d2, rook b7, a3, a5. Hikaru is trying to attack there. Magnus is trying to just stop it. Rook f2, wanting to bring the other rook to the party. And b4, trade, and rook f1. After a few more trades, we reach a position that, according to the engine, is very equal. But it's actually very nice to play for white because there are so many ideas. First of all, the rook sacrifice. Because white could take on f6, make Gotham chess very happy. And after pawn takes, the queen is sliding on h6. This would be a disaster. Can we just see it, please? Thank you. All right. Queen here. And now knight h5 is coming, which would be checkmate here or checkmate there even. So this cannot be taken. This is game over. But a beautiful idea. So what did Hikaru play? Knight h7. Makes lots of sense. And now it's time for the move d4, finally. After pawn takes, you want to take with a pawn. And now Magnus has 2 strong pawns next to each other. We are about to get to a very important moment. Queen g5 attacking the knight, knight f6, bishop d1, removing some squares to the knight, to the queen, and preparing the move h4. Forcing the queen to move away from this diagonal because Magnus really wants to sacrifice the rook. And after pawn takes, the queen is going on f4. Is less impressive than the previous sacrifice, but is very strong. Now, rook b2 is what Hikaru played. Very logical, trying to create some counterattack on the second rank. And now Magnus converted here is just very classy. Bishop h5, attacking the queen. The queen moves and now the bishop goes back, wanting to give this square for the knight. The rook is moved to join the other rook on the second rank. And now, first d5. The bishop is moving. And then knight h5, forking the queen and the pawn. The queen is moving, we take here, the king has to move. And now, I didn't expect this move, because I was looking, okay, how is white giving mate here? And it's so beautiful, just rook c1. The idea is that the rook might join here, also blocking the rook from actually getting to the second rank, because then white can sacrifice the other rook. And after queen takes is checkmate, everybody. Let's see it on the board. Checkmate. So Hikaru played king g7 to protect this pawn. And now e5. Opening up the position even more. Pawn takes. Knight check. The king moves. Bishop e4. After any move of black, there will be a checkmate in few more moves. Rook c3 is coming. The rook is joining the g file. Hikaru resigned. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see something for the black pieces, make sure to check out my video on the Sicilian defense. This opening, it can be so aggressive, and also white never knows how to play against it. Have fun. Ciao!